for you. Can't nothing stop me. I got some things I gotta do. Hey, 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 hey. I'm making a move. Study long.
Well, a big welcome here today to MaryBeth Hyland, founder of SparkVision and newly published author of the #1 best-selling book in the workplace category on Amazon, Permission to Be Human. MaryBeth, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, such a gift to be here with you and your community. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course, of course. So I'd imagine book just came out 2 days ago from when we're recording this. Been a bit of a whirlwind week, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm running on right now. If it's energy, if it's fumes, if it's love, it's like a combination of a lot of things, but it's been really quite a gift.
For the people out there listening who I can't believe they haven't downloaded a copy yet, but who aren't familiar with the book you just put out and with SparkVision, can you tell us a little bit about what the book is about, who should be reading it, and why they should be reading it?
Yeah, so the book is Permission to Be Human, the Conscious Leader's Guide to Creating a Values-Driven Culture. So it tells you a little bit in the title, but really this book is for anybody who is an individual who cares about the culture of their organization, who cares about the people within their organization. Anyone who's ever felt like an underdog because maybe they were labeled as someone who cared too much, or they were too sensitive, or they were putting people first in a way that wasn't helping the profits in what was more important for how they were using their time and energy. And so the idea in the book is that over 10 chapters, you will literally go on a journey through storytelling, through proven practices, through national data, and my work as a workplace culture consultant who has been doing these values-based efforts in companies for many years now, being able to really say, okay, here's step one. Here's how we start to uncover our core values. Here's how we start to own them and make them ours versus what everybody else is saying about them. And then here's how we're going to embody and live them so that people can really go on an intentional journey through that process. But also the whole permission to be human side of it is recognizing that it's not rainbows and sunshine all the time, that there is going to be pitfalls. This is not easy work. Soft skills, or as we're now calling power skills, are really hard. They're very hard to develop. And so along the practice of giving the reader a guide to do it, there's also meeting them there and saying, okay, permission to be human. Here's probably going to be a stumbling block for you. And here's how you can pick yourself up when and if you meet that stumbling block.
Well, those power skills, not only are they the hardest to develop, but they're also the hardest to identify.
Oh, yeah. Self-awareness is one of the greatest opportunities for all of us, myself included. And it's a very difficult thing for most people when they are confronted in a way where they have to really look in the mirror and take responsibility for their impact in the culture around them, for better or worse. And sometimes it's hard for people to even celebrate themselves and all the good things they're doing. I'm one of those people. And other times it's really hard to get people to acknowledge the ways in which they're hurting others and taking ownership and doing the work to make it right and come back together into a cohesive team that's truly a reflection of those values and not just a nice idea.
Well, you talked about it early in the book, and you talked about how the golden rule is actually really difficult because it says treat people how you want to be treated, but most people really don't know how they want to be treated. They've never taken the time to look inwards and identify who they are and how they want the people around them to treat them. And I think that also kind of stems into step one of your process in it's hard to create a culture that works towards your values when a company doesn't know their values, or even when a person doesn't know their values. It's really difficult to take the time to look inwards at those things? What are some things that, and maybe this is two questions or two topics of conversation, but what can a person do to look inwards and identify their personal values, and what can a company do to look inwards and identify their company values?
Yeah, so first of all, before I answer those questions, you're the first person ever to quote a part of my book and ask me about it. So this is like a very big moment. So thank you for creating that possibility for me. It's a wonderful thing. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to begin reading. So first question, how does a person begin to understand their own core values? This is a really important question to be asking, because oftentimes, much like that golden rule of treat people the way you want to be treated, but what do we do when we don't know how we want to be treated? That was really talking about the fact that most of us are just trying to avoid pain and trying to fit into a space in which we are approved of by others. And so oftentimes when as an individual we're going to the journey of uncovering our values, a lot of them aren't actually ours. They are what our mom wanted them to be, what our dad wanted them to be, what the biggest influencers in our life said mattered, versus what happens when I actually push all that aside and just look at myself truly without caring for anybody's approval other than my own. And so I think that's really important of distinction for anybody who's on a journey to do this, because there's a whole bunch of ways, and I'll give one example. In the book, there's like a list of values that you can look at, and you can start to categorize them based on your core values, meaning values that drive you, things that are unshakably who you are. Your aspirational values, meaning these are ones that you wish drove you, but it's not real. Like, I wish that health drove me, but it doesn't. I'm grateful to be married to someone who is a holistic lifestyle coach who makes sure that I keep my health intact in that way. There are things that don't resonate with you, so not values at all. And then there's just values which describe you, but they don't motivate you per se. So for example, for me, politeness is something it really matters. Like, if we were to leave this and you were to say MaryBeth was the rudest guest I ever had, that would be massively upsetting to me, because I would never want to come up in that way. But I don't wake up in the morning and go, yeah, I can't wait to be polite today. Whereas with my core value of authenticity or vulnerability or empathy, I do wake up saying, this is who I am. I can't wait to be that person. I really want to be that person. So for somebody who's interested in uncovering these for themselves, there's two ways that I would recommend. One would be find a list of values that exist. Obviously, there's a list in my book. You can Google it and find, core values list, and I'm sure you can find a bunch of things. I personally refer to the Schwartz value scale, which is an individual who did a significant amount of research in this value space. And then you just start looking at the word and categorize it. Say, okay, that drives me. That doesn't resonate with me. That's an aspiration of mine. So that you can quickly start to get the words down. Now, that's not the end, okay? I do not recommend picking words off a list and then just saying, okay, I did it. No, that's the first micro step. Because from there, what you would want to do in looking at that list is start to see, some people, we have an online tool that people do this through when we have our values retreats and workshops, so that they get a values profile, and they can see it all nicely. And some people have like 40 things as their core values. Well, sure, you can technically be motivated by 40 things, but if you really want to be thoughtful and intentional about living in alignment with your value, you can't do that with 40 things, right? You really want to get clear on what are the 3 to 6. What is the one? What's the number one? And begin to define it. So what does it mean for you? What does it mean for MaryBeth, right? What does it mean for Travis? it's going to be different how I define authenticity versus you do. So getting really clear on what it means to you as an individual. And then if you want to take it a step further, you could then look at your life, go back in your life and say, who were the people who instilled this in me, for better or worse, right? Because they embodied this in the positive way, or they did not give me this in the negative way. So for example, sense of belonging really drives me. And a big reason why it does is because I did not have that within my own home growing up. I didn't feel like I belonged there. So it's a huge driver, not because I was given that in a beautiful way, but rather because I was constantly at odds with myself because I didn't understand the way I was a part of it. So that's a little bit more than a quick picking off a list, but I highly recommend going through that process, because you really want to honor the people, the milestone moments, the experiences that built that value system inside of you, because it's really at that point that you can ask yourself, are these mine? Or are these things that other people want me to be?
Yeah, you talked about that quite a bit, about how you did have a bit of a difficult journey growing up. Can you tell us a little bit about your story personally, about what were some of the experiences that you went through, and how did you go about identifying what the values that were truly important to you are?
Yeah, I absolutely will. But I want to come back to the question about how a company can do the core values too, because I didn't want
Sure.
to jip you. Jip you on your two-parter there, but I'll make it shorter, I promise. So, when a company wants to uncover their core values, my recommendation is that you start by figuring out who are all the individuals there and what intrinsically motivates them. So you would have everybody go through that process of understanding their core values. And then you would understand, okay, as a collective unit, which ones do we share? What are the trends? What are the themes? And then put it through the lens of your business, your industry, your work, to see if there's something else you may want to add. But you'd go through the same process of defining it, understanding where in the past in your business have you been really successful, what are the stumbling blocks and opportunities for the future, to really say, these are what matter for our company versus, these are the ones we picked off the wall because that's what we see other people in our industry saying matter, right? So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so, and we were probably going to get here, but this can be one of the, I think, biggest challenges for companies that do take on this exercise. What can a company do when they do say, you know what, Mary Beth is right. We do need to take the time to uncover our core values, and it's something they haven't done before. And they go about doing it, and they uncover their core values, and then they come to find that there are people on the team, and a lot of times they can be really successful people, and not that those people are bad people, but they're people that don't represent their core values.
Yeah.
How does a company handle that situation when they do go through this process of identifying their core values and matching it up with the team?
Yeah, it's true. It's real. It's a real thing. And so in the ideal world, your values are created at the beginning of your birthing of your company, right? Like in the ideal situation, that's the beginning. Just like someone would make a business plan, this would be a part of it in a traditional way that people have just accepted that that's a normal thing to do. This needs to become a part of that process in just the standardized way that we go about this, because it is a different experience when you're coming back, whether you're changing the values because they were just nice ideas on the wall and you really want to make them real accountability tools, versus this is the kind of thing that these 10 people want to sit around a table and decide for the rest, the thousands of other people who work here. And so they're being bestowed on the group, right? Versus engaged in the process. So I think that when you're in the situation where they're either being retooled or refreshed or created for the first time after many years of not having them, that's when you're going to have more of the situation that you just described. Mm-hmm. So there will be people who will realize, oh, that actually doesn't motivate me. So what does that mean for me now? And it's very important that the facilitators of the experience are paying attention to that. Because you don't want anybody to feel shame or guilt or embarrassment because they have different values. That's not the point. Like the big part of values work is recognizing that there's no perfect combination. There's not the ideal profile of what that looks like. And so respecting that, yeah, we are different and unique, and the way that our values were instilled in us, for better or worse, right, are big parts of who we are, whether we realized it before having this conversation or not. And so being able to support people in that process and also help them to understand and see what possibilities now exist for them as a result of this illumination. So if it's the kind of thing that's like, a lot of times the values work is a tool to create measures and metrics for people who are consistent violators of the values and culture killers, to be able to say, okay, now we are saying that honesty is the most important thing here. So if you are not adhering to these behaviors, you're not going to be a good fit for this team anymore. And so it can also be used for a tool to support people in transitioning to other positions and organizations that are a better fit for them. And it also can be a really great tool for the opposite, right? Bringing people closer together in ways that perhaps they thought they were really different, but through these conversations and community building in the work, they realize that actually they're not that different, and they thought they were on the surface. That's actually some of the most rewarding pieces of being a facilitator of this work, is that I have often had people in small groups who I learned later were people who butt heads, and then came to find out that through the process they learned that the reason why is because they shared so many of the same core values. And that they were so passionate about the way they were showing up in them, but they weren't speaking through that lens and through that language. So one of my favorite stories was they stood up at the end and they shared, we have always not gotten along, and everybody here knows there's been issues, and now we know it's because we're both so driven by the same core values. We've committed to having weekly coffee with each other and continuing these conversations.
That's
so
interesting.
Stuff like that
That's
happens.
Really
It's like this incredible gift that you don't know how people are going to respond, but 9 out of 10 times that is the way in which it ultimately ends.
So you said that in an ideal world, these conversations, these values are being identified at the inception of a company. But I would imagine that discussion is rarely happening. And there are so many companies that are established, that are successful, that are doing well. How do companies identify that this is an issue, that they don't know their core values? They might think they do. They might have some buzzwords. They might have 40, which is a big problem. But what's the first step? What's the first thing a company can do? Say, this is something that we do need to focus on. What's that first baby step they take out the door?
So let's pretend this is a company who doesn't have values. Is that fair?
That's fair.
So it's fair if they don't have values and they're realizing, hey, this is an opportunity for us. What's the first step? For me, the first step is getting really clear on why you want to do this. Okay, because many leaders want to do it as a branding exercise, as a marketing technique, as a way to check a box for what you can find on job descriptions or on the website or on your back of your business cards or whatever it might be. And I'm not saying that doesn't have meaning, like that it's still good to go through those exercises. However, if you're going to invest in real values work, that the intention is that this will now become a normal part of our operations here, you got to be really clear that that's actually what you're investing in. Because it's significantly different than, okay, we spent 1 day or 3 days on a retreat and now we've got all these things. And the retreats I facilitate for companies are 3 days. You could easily go through those 3 days, feel really awesome, and then nothing ever happens afterwards. And so what does that do for the rest of the team? It leaves them feeling incredibly defeated, depleted, like they had all of this hope of what was going to change and be different, and then none of that happened. And so that, I think, is the most important step one, is to get clear on why are you doing this and what is your intention on seeing it through. Because if you're going to engage your whole team in the way that I recommend doing it, I always recommend that if you're creating values for your organization, that you engage everybody, whether it's 20 people, 20,000 people. Obviously, you're not going to be able to facilitate the same experience with 20,000, but you can still give them the opportunity to engage, even if it's through a survey, so that people feel like they were a part of the process versus we're going to tell you what it is, and therefore you're expected to be motivated by it. Instead of what are you motivated by and how can we put that through the filter of what we do here. And so that mindset is really important on the front end.
Well, starting with why, Simon Sinek has built an entire career off of that that one sentence, and starting with why, not only why you're doing this particular exercise and establishing your values, but what is your why as a person, as a company, I think can really lead you to start the conversation on the values.
Yeah. So it's I talk about it this way: vision is your why, right? Like the big picture. Simon Sinek's so great with that. Mission is your what. What do you actually do every day? And your values are your how. So how do you get that accomplished? How do you accomplish your mission and your vision? And that's one of the coolest things about values, are that anybody could lift your vision and your mission, take it and make it, their version of it. But when it comes to how you do the work, that's not something that people can steal. You can't steal someone else's culture, right? And so you have to embrace. You might get inspired by pieces of it and then make it, your version of what that looks like. But ultimately, it's an experience where you have to be clear on how are we going to go about this every day. That's why are we doing this, right? And so it's because we want to have a unique, inspired, purposeful, engaged, productive, profitable culture. And when that's the response and the answer to that question of like, why are you doing it? Then it's like, okay, let's make this happen.
So the companies have established their why, their mission, their vision. They've taken the effort to engage their team in establishing their values. What next? How do they implement the how? How do they go out and change the way, and hopefully not much, but change the way that they're doing business to achieve that mission, to achieve that vision?
Yeah, and Travis, I love that you said hopefully not much, because if they really are your values, there shouldn't be humongous dramatic shifts that are happening. It really is a fine tuning and a tweaking and creating those guardrails and that compass for, okay, so maybe we were here, so we got to get here, but it's not like we're going to go from here to here. We really need to be able to have an experience where the values that are being put down are not completely aspirational. There could be some aspirational pieces of it, but that they are actually who you are. So I love that you brought that up, because I think that's really important. Otherwise, no one will take them seriously. They won't matter, because it's like, oh, that's just some poster. It doesn't actually, it's not actually what we do here. But okay, so you have your values, you've got them defined. What do you do next? I talk about something that I call value promises, which is essentially a code of conduct. So the idea behind value promises, and just like creating the values, this is something that I also facilitate with the entire team to determine what are the commitments we're going to make. Because if somebody else is telling you what you're supposed to be committed to and you're not a part of the process, it's going to be a lot harder to have buy-in to that. And so we take one value at a time and go through the process of saying, okay, what is a promise that we want to keep to ourselves and to the team at large as it relates to our behavior with this value? So what does it mean to be empathetic? How are we expected to show up? And so I recommend having at least one promise for each one of your values so that it's not to me, it means I'm supposed to be doing this or that, but it's very clear and apparent. And so in that way, there's also the opportunity for accountability around it. So how can those promises be implemented into one-on-one coaching? How can it be part of two-way feedback? How can it be a metric used for annual reviews, for the way that your customers are doing surveys about the experience they're having with your team member or a specific individual? How are you using it in a way that it is a part of determining whether somebody gets the promotion or not? Right? And so there are so many ways that values can be integrated, not only from the individual, how the individual is showing up in their behavior, but also in your policies, in your procedures, in your budgets, what you're choosing to invest in, how you're making your decisions. That's what is super exciting to me about this book, is that there's a lot of talk about values, which is a beautiful thing. I'm happy to see more and more people talking about it. But there isn't as much talk about, okay, what do you do after you know them?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I know them, so therefore we did it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a problem that we've fallen into, because we went through an exercise that's similar to this a couple of years ago, where we got the entire team, multi-day workshop with someone facilitating to help us clearly identify our values, coming up with, I love the idea of your value promises. I think we did okay at that, but I'm going to relook at that because I think that's something that we could do better. And the entire team was involved with it then, but our team is different now. This was 3 years ago that we did this. And I know we've fallen into the trap of, we know the people that were part of the exercise know the values. They were part of it. They live towards those values to achieve our mission. But the people that come in new, we don't talk about them as much because we live them. They're comfortable to us. They're
assumed almost.
Yeah, we almost assume that this is part of that. So how can somebody keep out of the trap that we've fallen into?
You're not alone.
Assuming.
You're not alone. And I think it's really awesome that you're asking that question, because it's not the thing that's cool about culture is it's never done. It's never over. It's never like you've reached the thing. It's constantly evolving every single day. So there's always an opportunity to make a new choice, which is really cool. And so when it comes to a team or an organization who has been very intentional about the defining process, but then new team members have come in that haven't been a part of that, it's a wonderful opportunity to revisit. What does your hiring process look like? So how are the values woven into the way you're talking about the work, the job description, the expectations of the individual? How is it a part of the interview process? So that in the book, I talk about not only the interview process from you asking the candidate, but also their references, right? So how can you get a little bit more of a 360 view of their way of living these values? Not that they have to be your way, but like just to get real examples of what that looks like and how it truly motivates them intrinsically. Then the onboarding process, right? So these are all like key things in the beginning. Where are there opportunities for people to really learn what you guys went through? What was that? It sounds like it was an amazing experience based on what you described and how your whole team got together. One of the things I recommend is having someone who's went through that experience actually speak at the onboarding process, talk about it. Talk about what came up for them, and then give people an experience in real time that's a little micro version of what you all did over multiple days, so that they can start to recognize, okay, so what's one of your core values?
Well, here, let's do a little experiment.
Okay.
Noah's our producer. Noah's listening in, and he's been with us for about 6 months. Noah, do you have any idea what our core values are?
Our core values, I would say, having our outing yesterday was really helpful. Just being able to see everyone in person, mostly for the first time, rather than over Zoom. It gave me just a very solid grasp of, the team I'm working with.
But
So
we have 5 that are clearly identified. Can you name one of them? And I'm not throwing you under the bus. I'm throwing me under the bus to see how we did bringing you
Without
on
looking
board.
it up.
Without looking it up, okay.
Yeah.
I would say teamwork is a crucial component to what we do.
It's very close, but it's not quite there. Noah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So yeah, not teamwork, but synergy. So I think it's so I guess it's good and bad, because Noah, we did not do a good job in the training process of being able to really articulate deliberately, these are our core values.
And where did they come from, and why do they matter, right?
Right.
And so, first of all, big props to you for being willing to be vulnerable right there. Like, you just set an incredible example to any other leader who thinks they have to, protect that as like a little secret. And that's not real.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how this stuff works. And so the fact that you were just willing to pull behind the curtain and say, you just went through an onboarding, what do you think our values are? I want to say that I'm impressed, very impressed with you for being willing to do that. So synergy, one of the ways you have 5, right? A great thing that you could do with your team is maybe you have 5 people in the company. Each person takes one value, and they intentionally talk about what it means, how it came to life, and how they experience it there. And then after each person shares, say, 5 individuals, one for each, you have your onboarding team partner up with somebody and then share about when has synergy made a difference in their lives. When have they been motivated by synergy, right? And so it's a real-time embodied experience versus being told.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Noah, get set for your next for our next morning meeting with you and all the new people. Thanks, MaryBeth. So how can companies hire to the values? How do they go about during the interview process searching for people and identifying people that I don't want to say necessarily match the values, but can enhance the values?
Yeah, and I love that you said that. You're so on point. Yeah, it's true that there's actually quite a big debate going on right now about culture fit and whether that's discrimination, because you don't want to have a bunch of people that are all the same, right? You want to have all different kinds of people that bring a beautiful experience together because of that diversity that you would never have otherwise. And so values fit, I think, is a really meaningful way to have that conversation. And because just like we were talking about synergy a moment ago, what synergy means to me is likely different than what synergy means to you. But if I'm not driven by it, by my definition of it, I'm probably not going to be driven by your definition of it either, because that's what it means to me, right? And so I think it's really important for setting that individual, the prospective new hire, up for success, to be really articulate and really clear on what does it mean. So I actually recommend that not in the first interview, but say you have 3 rounds of interview process, that by the last round, you are reviewing the value promises with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that it is not and by the way, you're going to be held accountable to this. It's like, no, we want to show you how important this is, how serious we take this, and that we are literally going to go through these step by step, and we're going to help you understand how you will be held accountable to these in the same way that I will be held accountable to these, right? In the same way that every single one of us are held accountable to these, because that's another one that's really quite a rubbing point for folks, when only certain people are held accountable and other people get away with it because, they're a good big producer, but they are terrible when it comes to the way they treat their colleagues. And so that's something that if you're gonna invest in this, you have to be invested in it all the way, not just for some people, not just for new hires, for the entire team. And you can certainly do that in an intentional rollout, right? It doesn't have to be all or nothing, or it's not going to work. It can be an organic process of making it happen. But in the hiring process, it is simply unfair. It is unkind. It is inappropriate to hire an individual who is not in agreement with what they're going to be held accountable to. And so the combination of being really upfront about it through the job description, through the interview process, through asking those references, the same types of questions, for giving people an experience to actually see what they're going to be held accountable for because it's so clear, that is the most comprehensive way that you can be thoughtful about that process. Now, it's not a magic answer either, because we all know when we're in interviews, we're putting on our best foot forward and all that, and we may not be speaking 100% authentically because we're trying to say the right thing to get hired. So I want to just put that out there too, and thinking about the permission to be human aspect of things. People, when they're in an interview process, are on high alert, right? They're in a very specific mindset. They have a very specific energy. And most of the time, they want to impress who they're with. That's the point, right? They want to be the winner of the opportunity. I think that either the most aligned or the greatest misaligned are the ones who say, you know what, I really appreciate you telling me about that, but that's not my jam, so I'm excited for you to find the right person. That's pretty rare to find that individual.
It is. It's happened to us a couple of times, and I really always appreciate it. I'm always in awe of the person that during the interview process has the knowledge and strength to say, thank you, but your opportunity is not right for me. And how can people interviewing for a position find that strength and be able to identify which companies match their values and match how they want to be successful?
Yeah, I think the first piece that I mentioned just a moment ago of being true to yourself. I think that oftentimes when we're in a position, especially if we're unemployed, looking for employment, and there's financial stuff weighing on you, you're more likely to chameleon your way into a role that maybe isn't the right fit for you because it's a survival. It's a moment of survival. And I respect that. It's not to put that down.
Yeah.
And we are not put on this earth to work and pay our bills and retire and transition. That's not what we're here to do as humans. We're here to come alive, right? We're here to ignite possibility. We're here to make impact. We're here to make a difference. And that's different for each person. And so having that self-awareness as the candidate of what that means to you by going through that process we talked about of uncovering your values and knowing why they matter so much to you, it's really key in your sense of well-being and alignment moving forward once you get offered and are onboarded and officially a part of the team. And so I think it's really important to also, I was so impressed. We just started a new partnership, and the person that we partnered with, she said to me in the first meeting, these are the values of our organization, and this is what matters to us in a partnership. And we just want to get really clear about that before we even continue the conversation. And I was just blown away by that because she was pitching me. Right? And so it's the same kind of dynamic in an interview. How impressive, at least for me, not everybody might feel this way, but I would be so blown away if somebody came to an interview and said, these are my top 3 core values. And I recognize that they may not be the same ones that you all have here for the company, but these are important to be nurtured within my experience here at work. Can you tell me what that opportunity would look like? Mm-hmm. So an interview is not just one way. You're interviewing each other, and I think candidates often forget that they also have the power in the opportunity to ask questions and to get real answers. And so what I would want, my ideal, this is another book coming in the future, maybe we need to collaborate on this one, is that process of the candidate understanding what matters. And to be fair, the majority of that can also come from looking at past jobs, seeing what did I really love, what parts of it lit me up, what were the experiences that made me feel the most in alignment with my authentic self, that gave me a sense of purpose. And then you can start writing what those experiences were. So maybe it's something like, having community meetings. Okay, so what value does that represent? Is that collaboration? Is that connection? Is that sense of belonging? And being able to reverse engineer your values based on the experiences that were high point moments for you in the past can be a really positive way to bring them forth in interviews. And on the flip side, you can also do it from your low point moments. So if you were miserable because you had to work in spreadsheets all day long and you're the person who wants to go out in the community and connect with people, it's really important to be asking questions about, all right, I don't get jazzed by these kinds of experiences. And yes, there's always in every job going to be a part of it that's not your favorite part, right? That's why it's called a favorite, because it can't be all of it. But you want to make sure that the majority of your time is not going to be reigniting past experiences that didn't serve you. So having that self-awareness and being able to come to the table and say, these are the things that make me thrive. These are my 3 core values. And these are the things that really I don't do well when this is the case. I know like micromanagement is a big thing that comes up, and same thing as before, like who is interviewing is going to say, oh yeah, I actually am a micromanager. You usually don't find out about that stuff until you actually start the role, but having that clarity, that transparency from the beginning can make you feel in integrity with yourself. And at the end of the day, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, well, I think it can be challenging for so many people because so often when they're looking for a job is when they need a job. And people's hierarchy of needs, safety, shelter, food, clothing, aligned company values falls pretty far down the list. Yep. And it probably shouldn't. No, because when you are happy, successful, doing the work that you love, all of those other needs are easier to come by and are usually greater. But what advice do you have for people to find the positions and when to start looking for the positions for companies that will allow you to thrive as your best self?
So if you're an individual who is in that survival space, not knocking that, get the job, get your bills paid, do what you need to do. That is super important. I've absolutely done that in my life. And do the self-discovery work while you're there, right? Use whatever is happening in your life as a little petri dish, a little experiment to say, all right, these are the things that light me up about this. These are the things that drain all the energy out of me. So while I'm here getting my financial stability, I am learning more about myself. I am understanding how I can articulate those things about myself more effectively, and I can look for other positions and things that are going to be a greater alignment for me in the long term. Because what is so painful for me to hear, and unfortunately I hear it every day, is people who have spent their entire lives doing something that I had no passion for, simply because it created a certain amount of stability in their lives. And again, I'm not knocking stability. We all want that, right? We want to have a sense of freedom that comes from stability. And that's important. And at the same time, it's important that we honor our aliveness, that we honor the time that we have here on this earth, and that we really tune into the pieces of ourselves that are waiting to be brought out and to be encouraged and to be supported. And when you can find a team, a culture, a job that is going to nurture those things, you're going to feel the greatest sense of purpose and aliveness and possibility than ever before. So if you're in a place of, I need this right now, fine, perfect, beautiful. Do that. And keep evolving while you do that.
We're all going to keep evolving together, and I bet people would evolve a bit quicker if they went out and read your book. MaryBeth Hyland, where can people go out and find you and find your brand new book, Permission to Be Human?
Oh, well, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, all major retailers. But you can also visit our website, which is SparkVisionNow.com. And then we have a site that's specifically for the book, which is permissiontobehuman.co, not com, but co.
MaryBeth, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. I hope the people listening take some time to reflect on who they are, what their values are, and how they can continue to grow and evolve and do great things in the world with those values.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the opportunity to spread the good word.
Thank you so much. And please make sure to like and subscribe if you found this interesting, if you dug it, if you want to leave us a review, it'd always be appreciated. You can check this out wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you so much. Have a great one, everyone.
I'm making a move. Study long, study wrong. Ain't nothing gonna happen on its own. I'm making a move. Don't need no angels for this song. I got joy all through my soul.